Live from the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Gatton, and we continue to follow that breaking news after days of warnings. Israel launching sweeping airstrikes on Iran. Let's get straight to Jeff Harris at the Live Desk with what we know right now, Jeff.
Breaking tonight, Dee, brand new video right here shows the strikes Israel says that are targeting Iran's nuclear sites and also top military, also nuclear scientists. Iranian state television says the head of Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard is now feared to be dead. Iran's state-run news media sharing this video right here of some of the destruction in their capital. Israel has closed down its airspace and moved officials to secret locations in preparation of a retaliatory strike.
The Jewish state refuses to be a victim of a nuclear holocaust perpetrated by the Iranian regime. Now, as Prime Minister, I've made it clear time and again, Israel will never allow those who call for our annihilation to develop the means to achieve that goal.
Taking a live look at the White House tonight, where President Trump is convening a cabinet-level meeting at this time. Secretary of State Marco Rubio with this statement right here, saying the U.S. was not involved in the strikes and their priority is protecting American forces in that region. Take a look at this map of known U.S. military bases across the Middle East. U.S. officials are preparing for possible retaliatory attacks by Iran, targeting some of these bases right here, which could result in a mass casualty event. The U.S. is warning Iran not to.
Breaking news right now, a major military escalation in the Middle East as we give you a live look over Jerusalem this morning. Iran fired dozens of drone strikes that Israeli forces did intercept overnight. This, of course, in response to Israel's wave of airstrikes to destroy Tehran's nuclear program. Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis joining us this morning for some more insight on this. Good morning to you, sir. We knew this was coming. The administration ordered Americans out of the Middle East. So what's next? What are you specifically watching for in the next 24 hours?
Well, so obviously we're concerned about radiological release from the strikes that the Israelis made, but also the retaliation. We expect that Iran will clearly launch more drones and missiles. And of course, Hezbollah, Hamas, which probably can't do much, but the Houthis might be able to do a little more. IRGC obviously has lost its senior leadership based upon media reports. And so there's a lot of unknowns at this point, Jan. What I'm most concerned about, however, is strikes against U.S. personnel. Of course, we started to remove those personnel through evacuation a couple of days ago, but the Iranians have threatened to attack us. And we have 40,000 troops in the region, plus dependents, and they're all around Iran. So that could be a major issue going forward.
You talked about the IRGC, the Iran Revolutionary Guard. We know now that there are reports that the head of the IRGC was killed, as well as the chief of the country's military. What does that mean for Iran's defense forces? Who is leading those forces now?
Well, just like every military, someone is the second in command will step forward. When we struck Soleimani under the Trump 1 administration in Baghdad, clearly there was an echo across that region and retaliation took place. But as far as IRGC's capabilities, they run all the armed forces. There's no doubt about that, and they'll continue to do so. But they will strike out, and they do have capabilities all over the region. Whether or not they're going to be able to touch us, I think is an issue that's unresolved. Keep in mind, a week ago, we redirected from what was going to Ukraine thousands of anti-drone capabilities into the Middle East, and in anticipation of what we've just seen.
Lieutenant Colonel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the attacks will continue for as many days as it takes, because he said, quote, "We cannot leave these threats for the next generation." He said, "When the enemy develops the capabilities to destroy you, stop him." As we know, there's been plenty of reports that reveal Iran had enough uranium, they'd enriched enough uranium to build nuclear bombs within days. So talk about the seriousness of this, especially in the hands of the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism.
You know, well, they've threatened to destroy Israel and attack the United States, albeit with nuclear weapons, which is why Mr. Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have made it clear that Iran would not become a nuclear state. Keep in mind that what Netanyahu said earlier this morning, Israel time, the Iranians were believed to have enough enriched uranium for at least 9 weapons, and they have plenty of ballistic missiles. We're not sure they could, mate the two, the nuclear weapon with a missile, but we're not taking any chances. And so Netanyahu said, no, the time is ripe, we must strike, and they did, and they'll continue to strike until they believe the Natanz and other nuclear facilities are put totally out of action. So we'll have to wait and see.
How should the U.S. respond? And at what point do we go in to protect Israel, to protect ourselves from one of our biggest enemies?
Well, we must respond by being very vigilant against any attacks on our facilities, because we've lost hundreds of U.S. service members over the years in the Middle East. So we will resupply Israel with some critical munitions, no doubt. We'll continue to use the USS Vincent, which is in the Arabian Sea just south of the Persian Gulf, and it can provide air cover to our facilities. Certainly our other naval facilities out of Bahrain will no doubt exit the port to keep it safe from strikes by IRGC and the like. So there are a lot of things that we must do to heighten security, but at the same time, we're hopeful that perhaps the Iranians will follow through and actually provide a counter-proposal that we can live with on Sunday, as was previously
So
arranged.
you think the talks are still on? You think that we still are going to have talks with Iran?
I think it's in Iran's interest to do this. Clearly, their sponsors, Russia and China, will have a voice here. I think China and Russia want to stabilize the region, and especially China, which is really dependent upon Iranian oil at the tone of 3 million barrels a day. So they want to see something to stabilize the region once again.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, we appreciate you joining us this morning, and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
I'm Atra El-Nashar in Washington. President Trump spending hours in the Situation Room with his national security team Friday as Israel and Iran launched additional missiles at one another. Soon after news broke Thursday night of Israel's strikes on Iran, the Trump administration issued its first comment stressing, "We are not involved." A close ally to Israel and in the middle of nuclear talks with Iran, the U.S. was already in a position to be pulled into what comes next. Iran suspending talks with the U.S. indefinitely, claiming the attacks were carried out with the cooperation, coordination, or at least they say a green light from the United States, saying the U.S. must be held accountable. President Trump telling Reuters, "We knew everything and I tried to save Iran humiliation and death. I tried to save them very hard because I would have loved to have seen a deal worked out. They can still work out a deal, however. It's not too late." Members of Congress are wary of a regional conflict breaking out, but are showing different levels of concern about U.S. forces getting involved. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says Iranian officials who survived Israel's initial strikes should agree to abandon their nuclear program. Quote, "If not, America, the greatest power for good on earth, should be all in to help Israel finish the job." Top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed, calling Israel's actions a reckless escalation. He says, "I urge both nations to show immediate restraint, and I call on President Trump and our international partners to press for diplomatic de-escalation before this crisis spirals further out of control." It's inevitable the U.S. will feel an economic impact from this conflict. Stocks were down Friday over the geopolitical instability, and oil prices saw an immediate spike. Gas Buddy's Patrick DeHaan tells me he expects gas prices to rise 10 to 25 cents over the next couple of weeks.
Conflict increases risk of oil flows being disrupted. The degree of what happens from here on out depends on the degree in which Iran responds, or if Israel escalates the situation and has new attacks.
So far, de-escalation seems out of the question. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar reporting.
I'm national correspondent Kayla Gaskins in Washington. Tensions boiling in the Middle East as Iranian state TV says more missiles are headed to Israel.
Missiles raining down on Tel Aviv Friday evening. Iran delivering an anticipated counterpunch in response to Israel's initial strike hours before. It started with Israeli drones emerging from a secret base built by Israel on Iranian soil. These drones crippled Iran's aerial defense system, opening the skies for Israel's Air Force to fly in and strike the heart of Iran's nuclear program. The attack also killed Iran's leading nuclear scientists and top military commanders. We spoke with Israeli Brigadier General Amir Avivi.
Do you think Netanyahu would have gone forward with this attack without a green light from President Trump?
I think he would, because this is really existential, but I'm glad that President Trump understands exactly what we're facing.
Israel saw a window of opportunity and took it. Iran's terror proxies that once sat menacingly on Israel's borders have been systematically reduced since the October 7th attack.
And there was an understanding that if we launch an attack on Iran, we have to fight all the proxies.
Hamas is hanging on to its existence by a thread in Gaza. Hezbollah is not doing much better in Lebanon. While the Houthis are still firing missiles, they're also weak, in part thanks to strikes by the U.S. The Iraqi militia are in disarray, and the Syrian regime that supported Iran toppled.
So yes, Iran is pretty alone, and this is why Iran is trying to move faster towards nuclear capabilities, and Israel is not going to let them do that.
Tehran announced Israel's actions amounted to a declaration of war, something Danny Citronowitz, an Iran expert we spoke with after the attack, agrees with.
We are in a war with Iran. It's not a campaign. It's not a fiction. It's a war. We have to be very cautious right now because we're only on the beginning stages of probably a long campaign. And operationally, yes, we have the upper hand, but strategically, we can find ourselves in the lower hand.
Directly before Iran's counterattack, Iran's Ayatollah gave a speech on Iranian state TV, saying, quote, "Strong action should be taken and will be taken. We will have no leniency." In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
We continue to follow the breaking new developments in the Middle East. Joining us now to discuss, combat technology expert and spectrum engineering and policy vice president Louis Libin. Talk to me first about the weaponry used on both sides here, Louis.
Perfect. Thank you, Didi. I really appreciate that. So on the Iranian side, what they're using is non-specific ballistic missiles, meaning they're going for the most coverage to do the most damage that you can see, as you're showing in the background over there. Israel is doing something that's completely different and has never been done before. So Israel, to begin with, they did they did the final build of drones within Iran. It was a decapitation strike that eliminated the enemy threat, the nuclear facilities, the intelligence gathering, the precision, the actual scientists. It was the result of really deep, long-term reconnaissance. Israel didn't make use of their own fifth column except through some of the people, but they also have done completely new weapons that have never been used before, something called effects-based operations. The strike was planned to disrupt the logistics and the morale of the Iranian people rather than just simply destroying targets and killing people. Right. Some of it was intended to neutralize Iranian C-3 nodes. But the most amazing weapons that we use are AI related. We all talk about AI. AI was applied in a major role. In one portion that they did, they formed mosaic warfare, which is a disaggregated semi-autonomous system using drones, satellites, sensors. They all work in an ad hoc combination.
It is a new type of warfare that they're navigating right now.
Absolutely.
There are now also heightened concerns that Iran could retaliate against the U.S. for helping Israel basically shield itself in the strikes. What does this mean for us, though, here at home? What could this look like?
So it could get pretty messy in the United States because we already have our own issues that we're dealing with right now. So we're worried about the full-scale regional war. We're worried about closure of strategic waterways. Within the U.S., escalation of terrorism, cyber attacks, collapse of fragile states, not in the U.S., but the ones nearby in the Middle East, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria arena, diplomatic shifts and alignments. We don't want the U.S. to make enemies of everyone. This could also force a mass displacement and a new humanitarian crisis. And the proxies of Iran will be weakened. We don't even know what that means, meaning who will be in charge. So there are a lot of potential impacts.
As you know, Iran already suspended nuclear talks with the U.S. If the Iranians don't sign an agreement with the U.S., could that prompt the U.S. to finish what Israel started? Well,
the world has a big challenge right now. Iran cannot get nuclear weapons for the sole reason they will use them. So yes, if it turns out to be a U.S. issue, it shouldn't be, but it is a global issue. And if the world doesn't attack this now, then we're just kicking it down the can down the road a little bit. And without the U.S. support, as we know, the risk of escalation increases. So the worst case, of course, is this nuclear brinksmanship. And the U.S. Army wargaming suggests that once this nuclear threshold is crossed, retaliation becomes more imaginable, even nuclear. So we're pretty scared out there.
It is alarming, as well as the timing of all of this, raising concerns. Louis Libin, also part of One Media. We greatly appreciate your time tonight on the National News Desk.
Anytime, my pleasure.
The fight between Israel and Iran lighting up the Middle East. The world waiting to see if the U.S. will remain on the sidelines. On Sunday, President Trump telling ABC News it's possible we could get involved, but we are not involved at this moment. Israel continues systematically taking out Iran's top nuclear scientists and officials.
I can inform you, Brett, that moments ago, we also got the chief intelligence officer and his deputy in Tehran.
But U.S. officials saying President Trump made it clear to Israel he's against an assassination of Iran's Ayatollah. Israel's President Benjamin Netanyahu dancing around the question Sunday.
Is that true? Actually, there's so many false reports of conversations that never happened, and I'm not going to get into that.
Trump aiming to prevent the war from escalating further in hopes diplomatic talks can resume.
I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens, but sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
Netanyahu telling Fox News their intelligence shows Iran was behind the 2 assassination attempts on President Trump last summer.
Through proxies, yes. Through their intel, yes. They want to kill him. Look, he's enemy number 1.
Iran's president had promised to take revenge against President Trump for his authorization of the strike that killed top Iranian general Qasem Soleimani during his first term. In 2022, Iran released an animated video of a targeted attack on Trump. Meanwhile, for Israel to achieve its ultimate goal of destroying Iran's nuclear facilities, it will either need incredible ingenuity or, many believe, help from the United States. The main nuclear site, Fordow, is nestled deep inside a mountain. Israel doesn't have a bomb powerful enough to reach the site, but Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Michael Leiter, says they have other ways.
Not everything is a matter of, taking to the skies and bombing from afar.
But you're certain you can wipe out Fordow?
We're certain that we can set back the nuclear weapons system development within Iran for a very, very long time.
The United States does have bombs called bunker busters, powerful enough to destroy the site and the planes to drop them, all currently sitting within flying distance of Iran. All it would take is a green light from President Trump. I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting. I'm national correspondent Kayla Gaskins in Washington. President Donald Trump will reportedly not join the other G7 leaders in signing a joint statement calling for the de-escalation of fighting between Israel and Iran. The fighting between Israel and Iran intensifying Monday. An Iranian strike killing at least 8 in Israel. An Israeli strike hitting the Iranian state TV studios during a live broadcast. President Trump answering questions about the conflict from reporters at the G7 summit in Canada.
It's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war. And they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
Until now, the U.S. has largely waited in the wings of the conflict, jumping in to help Israel's defense, but refraining from any offense.
What would it take for the U.S. to get involved in this conflict militarily?
I don't want to talk about that.
The U.S. is currently rapidly moving military assets to the Middle East, rerouting an aircraft carrier, bringing the total to 2 now in the region, and deploying dozens of additional aircraft to U.S. bases in Europe. Trump pointing out he's already given Iran 60 days to make a new nuclear deal. Israel, meanwhile, has taken control of the skies over Tehran and is expanding its targets, striking Iran's energy facilities, manufacturing plants, government buildings, and even a regional airport. This shift spurring some analysts to predict Israel's aiming at a full regime change rather than just destroying Iran's nuclear program. Iran says Israel's strikes have already killed more than 200 people. Iran punching back, some of its missiles slipping past Israel's aerial defenses. Iran also says they've shot down 3 Israeli F-35 fighter jets and captured a female pilot. The IDF denies this. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers split on the possibility of the U.S. getting involved militarily. Senator Tim Kaine introducing legislation to prevent President Trump from using military force against Iran without Congress's approval. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
President Trump said Iran is not winning its conflict with Israel. Last Friday, Israel launched what it called a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear program. Iran responded with a barrage of missiles aimed at Israeli targets. The fact-check team's Janae Bowens is joining us now. So let's back up to the last Iran nuclear deal. As you know, Trump was a vocal critic of that.
Exactly, Dee Dee. So the original Iran nuclear deal was signed in 2015 under former President Barack Obama. Now, this was to prevent Iran from building a nuclear bomb. In exchange for sanctions relief, Iran agreed to limit the amount of nuclear material it could produce and store. In 2016, the agreement went into effect. All of this is according to the Council on Foreign Relations.
And President Trump didn't think it went far enough.
Exactly. So President Trump withdrew in 2018 during his first term, saying it didn't address Iran's missile program or support for terror groups. Now, he reimposed those sanctions and demanded Iran stop threats against Israel and end human rights abuses.
Janae, thank you. And with this conflict, many Americans thinking, how does this impact me? A little later, Janae will be back to discuss how this conflict could impact your wallet. Israel has expanded its attacks on Iran, striking military targets and ordering evacuations into Iran. This escalation is the deadliest between the two countries to date. The fact-check team's Janae Bowens is back to discuss. Let's start with the history, Janae, of the conflict between Iran, Israel, and the U.S.
Yeah, Dee Dee. So this conflict goes back to 1979, when Iran's Islamic Revolution overthrew the U.S.-backed Shah and established a religious regime. Now, since then, Iran has called for Israel's destruction. Israel responded with airstrikes on Iranian proxies in Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza, seeing Iran as its biggest threat. Now, the U.S. has tried to limit Iran's nuclear program, most notably through the 2015 nuclear deal. However, President Trump withdrew in 2018, saying Iran couldn't be trusted.
Back here at home, on the consumer side, the summer driving season is heating up. What does this mean for Americans and gas prices?
Yeah, gas prices could go up. That's according to analysts who say Americans may pay up to 30 cents more per gallon by July 4th. Now, Israel's largest refinery in Haifa was hit, and Iran is a top oil producer. If Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, a key oil passage, prices could jump even more.
All right, we know you're staying on top of it. Janae, thank you. For more on this fact-check team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com.
Here, President Trump saying he is seeking, quote, a real end to the conflict with Israel and Iran, and had this to say to reporters aboard Air Force One.
An end, a real end, not a ceasefire, an end. So something that will be permanent. Yeah, or giving up entirely. That's okay too. Are you close there? Is that possible? Is that possible in the next 24
Why not? Certainly possible. Complete give up. That's possible, yeah.
He also reiterated on his stance with to keep nuclear weapons from Iran while speaking to reporters.
Doing pretty well. Right now, we're doing pretty well. Remember, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. We don't have to go too deep into it. They just can't have a nuclear weapon.
Now, he was on his way back to Joint Base Andrews after leaving the G7 summit in Canada early. As the president says, he expects these next 2 days will reveal more about whether Israel plans to slow down or accelerate its attacks on Iran. And we're keeping watch of the breaking news out of Tel Aviv this morning as tensions are rising between the two Middle Eastern adversaries, Iran and Israel, as we enter day 5 of this ongoing tit-for-tat airstrikes and missiles being sent into Israel by Iran. Israel defense officials are saying 30 Iranian drones were intercepted. A new video overnight is also showing parts of an Iranian missile that fell into Israel just north of Tel Aviv, as the Israeli military warned about 330 people in a Tehran neighborhood to evacuate. About 9.5 million people live in the capital city of Iran there. And this morning, we're learning more about Americans stuck in Israel right now. Our national correspondent, Kayla Gaskins, brings us the latest live.
Well, good morning. So many Americans in Israel right now are left scrambling to figure out how exactly they're going to get out of the country and back home. The main airport in Tel Aviv is shut down and all flights are canceled until further notice. The U.S. State Department has also issued a level 4 do not travel advisory for Israel. This morning, I spoke with some Americans who went to Tel Aviv last week for work, and then this fighting broke out, and now they can't figure out how to get home. They said the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem is not being all that helpful to finding solutions. The only option appears to be to cross by land into Jordan, where there are some limited flights available. And this comes as the fighting just gets worse on the ground and really shows no sign of calming down.
And the president calling his National Security Council team into the Situation Room as this conflict rises. Kayla Gaskins live in D.C. We appreciate the updates. Thanks so much.